Where are we at? This is what?
This is called the Russell Ranch, and this is Jeff Russell's property.
Okay.
He's the dad of Caleb Russell, who most people know.
We're at the Russell Ranch, Caleb Russell's dad's ranch, right?
Yep.
And we're at the 2024 KTM Off-Road, the Enduro Lineup launch. We've been riding bikes all day long. We've been riding 150 XCW, 250 XCW, 300 XCW, and 450 XCFW. And I brought Leon here from WP because I want to talk suspension. Those forks, this is a new XACT fork. It's not the old XACT where it was air fork, right?
That's correct. It's called the XACT closed cartridge fork. It's a spring fork. It's all new for this year. And a lot of people have been asking for something like this, and here it is.
Yeah, well, what I was a little bit concerned about is just that the bike was going to be a little bit too stiff, because some of the XC bikes in 2023, the model year, they were fairly stiff. But the XCWs have always been really, really plush. Yeah. And this new XACT fork I'm trying to decide, it may be the best spring fork I've felt out of the box, especially for an Enduro lineup. So talk to us about what challenges you guys had and what things you were trying to accomplish with this fork.
Sure. So this fork, we worked in cooperation with the Austrian team. They developed the settings, obviously, on the PDS bike and for the XCWs and for the dual sports. We also have this fork coming on the XC line, which is the linkage bikes. These are the race bikes. Different settings, but same overall hardware and technology.
So the XACT fork the air is going away.
The air fork is still specified for the SX line.
Okay.
So on the motocross bikes, the air fork continues through to this model year. On the off-road bikes, we have gone back to a spring fork. The thinking there is a lot of it's about the fact that air forks can pump up. They tend to pump up.
Yeah.
And in off-road racing, a lot of the racing is long races, 3-hour GNCCs and that type of thing, where you don't have time to go back and reset air and that type of thing. So that was one of the reasons that it came on these line of bikes.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you do add a little bit of weight going back to the spring, but these bikes feel very, very planted and I just feel a lot of confidence on that front wheel.
Sure, and spring forks, even if you do a conversion kit like the 6500 kit that we offer onto a bike that had air forks from the factory, a lot of times people do comment that the front wheel does feel more planted, and that is partly due to the extra weight.
Yeah. Well, and I was never one of the haters on some people hated the air fork. I actually, or didn't like it, maybe hate is too strong of a word. I always loved the adjustability of it, but something about this where you just get on it and it feels the same throughout the day on each bike, that's been really nice. And there's a lot, it's very, very plush. And also with the redesign of the swing arm and the rear shock. Can we talk about the rear shock too? Because there's a few routes on this little track this single track that we were going on, and at the early part of the day, it felt very, very smooth. As we've kind of worn it in a little bit more, it's gotten a little bit rougher, but the bike is really just handling it well. And so I feel like there's a really good balance between the front and the rear, but it's a totally new rear shock, right?
The shock is completely new. It still incorporates, obviously, the PDS technology that has been on the bikes for a long time. There's a fitment reason why the whole thing is new, because the chassis is new, the swing arm's new. So overall lengths of the shock, travel, it still has similar travel numbers and all that stuff, but a lot of the changes to the chassis mean that you're basically starting over from scratch. One nice thing about building a whole new rear shock is we can incorporate some of the parts that come across from the link bikes. So the DCC assembly and the hand adjustability are coming across from there. It's also got a straight rate spring, which is something that the previous generation had a progressive rate spring.
Okay.
That's a key difference. And internally, the shock has a brand new main piston, which is essentially the same style of piston as coming on the XACT linkage bikes. It's a different piston because this is a 46 millimeter body and those are a 50 millimeter body. It's the same style and design though. So
it's very good. The combination of the new frame with that new shock and the new forks, I mean, this is great. I mean, that's to say nothing about the motor. But I've been very pleased with these these 24s.
I've been doing suspension since the late 90s, and this is one of the best OEM. I would argue it's the best OEM fork that I've ever had to work on. It's very easy to tune, and the performance is easy to gain. And the other thing that I think is it's going to be a little different to what people are expecting. I think maybe in the EXC line, in terms of how much performance it has. It's not as the setting isn't really very soft and wallowy, and that is a bit of a difference, I would say. And then if you compare it to the XC line, which is our racing bikes that previously had air forks, again, some people aren't super pumped on those. There are people who do like them, but because of the type of racing that people use the bike for, which is long 3-hour races, the choice is made to go to a spring fork on those, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, one of the things I've always scratched my head about is a lot of the off-road bikes, say other brands like Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, they will be, even though they're supposed to be an off-road or a GNCC style bike, they're very stiff. I've always thought like these are valved for just like professional riders, and then they're being sold to the masses, regular guys like me. And that's something that I've always enjoyed about the XCW line from KTM. It's not too stiff.
Yeah.
It seems like they're the plushest type of racing platform that you can get, and I think for most guys it really works quite well. And then also finger clickers. Thank you so much for finger clickers. It's so frustrating to try to like get under your bars, and you have to have a 17 millimeter to adjust to high speed. So I love the fact that it's got finger clickers, even down on the rebound. What was the thought process there?
So I mean, obviously, we're building a lot of bikes, and so anytime we can get harmonized parts, in other words, we use the same parts in different applications, that's going to be a value in production. So the DCC assembly is essentially the same as from the Link bike. The rebound adjuster is all new design. It's actually something that I've seen 20, 30 years ago. A Japanese suspension would have the knob that you turn that's in line with the actual shock shaft. It's not a little clicker off the side, and I think that was primarily a packaging issue because of the rest of the bike and stuff in the way, all that stuff. But it's a nice design. It's easy to adjust, and it's all new shock. But what's really nice about it is that it gets to incorporate not only some components from other product, but also good thinking. Any problems you may have had before, you can now rectify, such as having hand adjusters. So that's pretty nice. Yeah.
One final question. So KTM has the PDS, whereas like in Gas and Husqvarna, you don't have PDS. You've got the linkage, even on the off-road bikes. So like what is it that, because I love the PDS, but what are some of the advantages you think about the PDS, and do you think KTM is going to keep PDS on their off-road bikes, or do you think they would standardize so that they're all the same, whereas you've got Husky and Gas that have linkage and these have PDS? Will we ever go away from PDS, or do you think it'll stay?
I personally think it'll stay. I like PDS myself. There are things about it that are different, obviously, to a Link bike, but in the application we're talking about, which is off-road riding, not motocross racing, I think the benefits outweigh the negatives in many respects. And it is, something that's proprietary, obviously, to the KTM brand, and it's got a legacy, many years of running the PDS. I don't see it going away.
That's good.
At all. And I haven't had a chance to ride the latest generation bike myself yet, but I have
the
previous one, and I'm very happy with the PDS.
Yeah, it's very good.
No problems with it at all.
I feel like some of the people that complain about PDS have never had it set up properly, or they just read in a magazine, somewhere that it wasn't good. And maybe for motocross riding, obviously the linkage offers some advantages, but I think for the type of riding we're doing here and the type of riding these bikes are designed for, it's fantastic.
Sure.
And that way you don't have extra parts to lube, and you don't have to have a special skid plate that comes down and protects your linkage, and you're not hanging up on rocks and roots and things. So if I'm going to do like a hard enduro style ride, I'd rather have PDS. Sure. And I've been a little bit nervous. I've watched kind of KTM. Sometimes they try to standardize on parts, and I'm sure it's to save costs. And I was like, I hope they don't do away with that, because I just noticed, well, you've got 3 brands. You essentially got KTM, Husky, and Gas, and KTM's the only one that has the PDS. And so I was a little bit worried that maybe it would be in danger, but
I believe it's going to be around for a while.
Good. That's good.
It is a proprietary technology, and people identify it with the KTM brand, and you know, as you said, in certain applications, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much. I think you guys have done a fantastic job with these forks. It is, if it is not the best OEM fork I've ever ridden, it's right up there. So,
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Lee.
Have a good one, Kyle.